1988. Pentagon officials walk into a hobby shop in suburban Maryland and find their top-secret stealth aircraft sitting on a shelf next to model trains and glue. It is a $10 plastic kit labeled F-19 Stealth Fighter, and it looks almost exactly like the classified program they've spent billions hiding. Security officials panic. How did a toy company obtain classified blueprints? Who's the mole? They threaten lawsuits, demand investigations, and prepare espionage charges. Then they discover the truth. The toy designer didn't steal anything, he just used basic physics and common sense. While defense contractors burned through billions building a stealth fighter that would never fly, a model kit designer sitting in his garage figured out what it should look like for free. This is the story of the A-12 Avenger 2, the $5 billion flying Dorito that failed so spectacularly, a toy became more successful than the real thing. Welcome to Shadowworks. Today, we open the file on the A-12 Avenger 2, the plane that cost $5 billion, never flew, and was outsmarted by a toy designer. The program was designated Special Access Required, a classification level above Top Secret, requiring presidential authorization to brief. Contractors worked in windowless facilities with armed guards. Engineers couldn't tell their families what they were building. Every blueprint was numbered and tracked, and photos were forbidden. The Navy claimed publicly that no such aircraft existed, and the budget was buried in unspecified black projects line items that Congress couldn't even audit. This wasn't just classified. This was a ghost program building a ghost plane. Then in April 1988, Testor Corporation, a model kit company known for plastic World War II bombers, releases something extraordinary, the F-19 Stealth Fighter. It's a sleek, triangular flying wing with buried engines and no vertical stabilizers. Aviation enthusiasts buy it thinking it's science fiction, but Pentagon security officers see it and go pale. The model looks almost exactly like internal concept drawings for the classified A-12 program drawings that should exist outside hardened facilities. The Defense Department threatens legal action. The FBI opens an espionage investigation, and Testor's offices are visited by very serious men in very plain suits asking very specific questions about sources. Here's what makes the story perfect. John Andrews, Testor's lead designer, had zero security clearance, zero inside information, and zero access to classified programs. What he had was an aerospace engineering degree and a copy of radar cross-section theory textbooks available at any university library. He sat down and worked backward from physics. Stealth aircraft must minimize radar return, therefore vertical surfaces create reflections, therefore no tail fins. Engines produce heat signatures, therefore bury them in the fuselage. Radar waves bounce off angles, therefore use smooth curves and flying wing design. He sketched it out, built a clay model, and Testor turned it into a $9.99 kit. When the Navy finally revealed A-12 concept art, years later, Andrews' design was shockingly accurate, not because he stole secrets, but because physics has only one answer to the stealth problem, and a toy designer figured it out faster than defense contractors burning $2 million per day. The A-12 Avenger 2 was supposed to revolutionize carrier-based strike warfare. While the Air Force's F-117 Nighthawk was a subsonic angular stealth bomber operating from land bases, the Navy wanted something far more ambitious, a supersonic flying wing that could launch from a pitching carrier deck, fly 1,000+ miles into enemy territory, completely invisible to radar, deliver precision-guided bombs, and return to land on a moving ship in the middle of the ocean at night. The requirements were almost contradictory: light enough for carrier operations, but strong enough to survive arrested landings, stealthy enough to evade Soviet air defenses, but durable enough for saltwater corrosion, and cheap enough to build in quantity, but advanced enough to remain cutting edge for 30 years. General Dynamics and McDonnell Douglas promised they could deliver all of this. They were catastrophically wrong. The engineering death spiral started immediately. Carrier landings are controlled crashes. Aircraft slam onto a deck at 150 miles per hour, snag an arresting cable, and decelerate from flying to stopped in under 300 feet, subjecting the airframe to forces that would tear apart a normal aircraft. The A-12's radar-absorbing composite skin was revolutionary for stealth, but catastrophically weak for impacts. First solution: make the skin thicker, but thicker composites added weight, which required stronger internal structure, which added more weight, which required more powerful engines, which added even more weight. Engineers called it the weight spiral. Every fix created two new problems. The aircraft grew heavier and heavier. Initial design 55,000 pounds. Final mock-up over 80,000 pounds, 30% overweight, before a single test flight. At that weight, the A-12 couldn't generate enough lift to take off from a carrier deck with any meaningful weapons load. The Navy's stealth strike fighter couldn't actually strike anything because it was too heavy to carry bombs and get airborne. By 1990, the program was hemorrhaging. The first prototype scheduled for 1990 was delayed to 1991, then 1992, and the manufacturers kept requesting extensions and funding increases while the Navy kept writing checks. $500 million became $1 billion, became $2 billion, became $4.8 billion, with nothing to show but wooden mock-ups and computer renderings. Subcontractors reported that composite manufacturing tolerances were impossible to achieve at scale. Wind tunnel tests revealed instability issues, and weight continued climbing. And most damning, the contractors couldn't explain where the money was going. Auditors found massive cost overruns, schedule slips, and technical problems that should have triggered program review years earlier. The A-12 was failing every metric simultaneously: cost, weight, schedule, performance. Congress was furious. The Senate Armed Services Committee launched investigations revealing that contractors had been reporting false progress for years. Internal memos showed engineers knew the weight problem was unsolvable as early as 1989, but management kept requesting funding anyway. Whistleblowers testified that mock-ups shown to Navy admirals were deliberately misleading. They looked complete, but were hollow shells with no functional systems. One engineer testified, "We were building a Potemkin village. It looked like a plane from outside, but there was nothing inside that would actually fly." The Navy had been defrauded, but they'd also been complicit, desperate to have a stealth carrier aircraft. They'd ignored warning signs and kept funding a program everyone knew was failing. The ultimate humiliation came when the Navy declassified A-12 concept art for a congressional briefing, and lawmakers held up photos of the real program next to Testor's toy kit and asked the obvious question: if a model company can figure this out for $10, why are we paying $5 billion for a plane that doesn't work? The contractors had no good answer. John Andrews' toy, designed in weeks, using publicly available physics, was more accurate than millions of dollars in classified design studies. The toy flew off shelves. The real plane never flew at all. Testor made a profit. The government lost billions. January 7, 1991. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney walks into a Pentagon press conference, announces something unprecedented. He is personally canceling the A-12 program, the Navy's most expensive acquisition in history. His statement is brutal. The program is 18 months behind schedule, $2.7 billion over budget, and the contractors cannot demonstrate they can deliver a viable aircraft. He's not pausing it for review. He's not restructuring it. He's killing it completely, immediately. Not a single A-12 has flown. Not a single prototype has been completed. 5 years of development, $4.8 billion spent, nearly $10 billion in today's dollars. And the only deliverables are mock-ups, incomplete airframes, and thousands of pages of paperwork explaining why nothing works. The flying Dorito dies on the drawing board. Then the lawyers got involved, and the disaster got worse. The Navy demanded contractors refund $1.35 billion for failing to deliver, while General Dynamics and McDonnell Douglas countersued for $1.2 billion. claiming the Navy changed requirements and caused delays. The legal battle consumed 23 years, longer than the actual development program, with lawyers billing hundreds of millions arguing over who was responsible for the failure. In 2014, 23 years after cancellation, the case was finally settled with no clear winner, and both sides agreed to walk away. The A-12 had cost over $5 billion to not build, and then hundreds of millions more in legal fees to argue about not building it. The lawyers made more money than the toy company, and unlike the contractors, they actually delivered something: billable hours. The A-12 Avenger 2 is a monument to everything wrong with classified defense acquisition. Massive budgets with no oversight, contractors paid for promises instead of results, requirements so ambitious they defy physics and secrecy used to hide failure instead of protect success. Meanwhile, John Andrews, a toy designer with textbooks and common sense, solved the conceptual problem in weeks that contractors couldn't solve in years with billions. The lesson isn't that stealth is impossible. The F-117 worked, the B-2 worked. The lesson is that classification and unlimited budgets create the perfect conditions for catastrophic failure, because no one can admit the project is doomed until it is too expensive to cancel. By the time Cheney killed the A-12, it had already consumed enough money to build 3 aircraft carriers. The toy cost $10, the real plane cost $5 billion and never existed. That's not a failure of engineering. That's a failure of accountability. The A-12 proved that stealth technology on carriers was harder than the Navy thought, but they weren't done trying. While the flying Dorito was collapsing under its own weight, another classified Navy program was underway, this time attempting to make an entire ship invisible to radar. They built something that looked like Darth Vader's yacht, angular, menacing, and so strange that workers called it the floating Dorito. The Sea Shadow, a stealth ship so secret it was hidden inside a submersible barge for a decade, and so impractical it's eventually scrapped for parts. The Navy's quest for invisibility continued, with similarly expensive results. Join us next time as we investigate the Sea Shadow. Click here to subscribe so you don't miss the invisible ship.